Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone. Well, yesterday something happened in the New Zealand media which I think highlights exactly why public trust in the mainstream media and in journalists is at an all-time low. This is what happened. The New Zealand Herald, which is New Zealand's largest newspaper, published the following article. Mum takes her own life after finding out she was expecting her 8th child. And the opening statement of the article says this: a mother of 7 took her own life while at home with her children and husband after she discovered she was pregnant again. Now, if I was to say to you that someone did X because they discovered Y, or someone did X because of Y, or someone did X after finding out Y, what am I telling you? I think we all universally understand that what I'm saying there is that not long after Y happened, someone did X and they were motivated to do X because of Y. So, for example, a man decided to withdraw all his savings from the bank after hearing about the financial crisis. What am I saying to you there? I'm saying that almost immediately after hearing about the financial crisis and being motivated by the financial crisis, this man withdrew all the funding from his account. So, if I say to you, Mum takes her own life after finding out she was expecting her 8th child, and a mother of 7 took her own life while at home with her children and husband after she discovered she was pregnant again, I'm telling you, right, that this woman was motivated by the news of her 8th pregnancy to take her own life, and that 8th pregnancy was the cause of this very tragic and sad outcome. That's what I'm telling you, right? Well, there's just one problem. That is not what happened at all. This is a complete falsehood. If you actually read the article, and by the way, this is how you find out it's a falsehood, you just keep reading the article. If you keep reading the article, you discover that in actual fact what had happened to this woman was that initially when she discovered she was pregnant, she had booked in to have an abortion, but then she had changed her mind, and some days after choosing to keep the baby, she had taken her own life. But not only that, we discover that this tragic incident where she took her own life and the life of her unborn child was lost as well happened 25 weeks into the pregnancy. So at that stage, she had probably known about her pregnancy for a good 15 to 18 weeks. Possibly even longer, I'm not sure, but somewhere around that mark, she would have known about her pregnancy for that long an amount of time. So it is completely erroneous to claim that she was motivated by the news of the pregnancy to carry out this act for those two important factual reasons. A, she decided to keep the baby and ummed and ahed and changed her mind and decided to keep the baby. And B, we're talking about an incident that took place 25 weeks into the pregnancy. But here's the really important bit, because the dishonesty gets even worse. If you keep reading the article all the way to the end, you discover more than 75% of the way through. So 3/4 of the way through the article, in the final couple of sentences, you read this very important fact. And this is the fundamental fact that actually really is at the heart of the story. A post-mortem examination later revealed the mother of 7 had alcohol, cannabis and antidepressant fluoxetine in her blood, a combination that could result in central nervous system depression. That fact is absolutely fundamental, and it is almost certain that it is this combination of chemicals that were mixed in her system that led to this tragic outcome. She also had, if you read the article, a history of depression, which is really sad, but an important fact as well that ties into what happened in this story. When you know all of that information and you go back and look at that headline again and you look at that opening statement in this article, you realise that this is just blatant dishonesty. This is lying. This is not telling the truth at all. Because in no way can you justify claiming that she was motivated by the news of another pregnancy to take her own life. You simply cannot make that claim at all. And there's no way that you can strongly insinuate, by the way you construct your headline and your sentences, that she had taken her life not long after finding out she was pregnant. That's not true either. This article really sums up, I think, why there is such an all-time low amount of trust in the mainstream media. There is just no justification for this. You can't say, oh, well, you know, we were rushing to print. I mean, this was a reprint, by the way, from another UK newspaper. Now, what that UK newspaper chooses to do with its publication, you know, I'm not going to critique because I don't read that newspaper. But in my country, this was republished in the New Zealand Herald. And the staff, the editors, the journalists, whoever were involved in republishing this, I think that they should take a long, hard look at themselves, because they really need to. At the very least, you've got one of two things happening here. One, at the very least, you have got atrocious fact-checking going on at New Zealand's largest newspaper. Number two, you have got people who just don't care about the truth anymore at New Zealand's largest newspaper. Either way, you cannot rely on them to be a reliable source of information, of accurate information anymore. And that's a real problem, because there's going to be moments when the New Zealand Herald reports information that we actually do need to know. But the problem is, if you are now someone like I am who's aware that they report and misrepresent facts in such a blatantly dishonest way, why would you trust them? You know, they're like the boy who cried wolf. Why would you trust them when they actually turn up in the village to tell you there really is a wolf? So, for example, the next day, when I was scrolling through my newsfeed and up popped the following from the New Zealand Herald social media site, the first thing I thought was, I'm not even going to open that or click on that, because I can't trust you to tell me the truth. I just really struggle to believe that what you're saying here, even in the status update, is accurate, based on what you did just yesterday or the day before in publishing the story that contained blatant falsehood, and you didn't even bat an eyelid doing that. So why should I trust you now? What this effectively means, and this is something I've been doing for a while now, is that you basically can no longer trust single source news. Like you used to be able to. You used to be able to say that, you know, that this was a reliable source of information, unless you know the journalist personally. And I know some journalists, and I know they have great integrity, and I know their work. Unless you know that the journalists are actually, or they have a consistent track record of integrity and honesty in their reporting, and you can trust them, basically what it means is that you now need to check all your sources from multiple different angles. And what's interesting is when you do that, it is amazing how often you discover that there is effectively propaganda and spin or misinformation or rushed information and a whole lot of inaccuracies that are being reported. Now, you can't blame the news reader for that. I've seen some people try and say, well, they wouldn't be doing this if we didn't have a hunger for this kind of stuff. They wouldn't be putting these kind of stories out there if we weren't reading them. I'm sorry, that's absurd. It really is absurd. It's like someone saying, well, you know, if those drug addicts didn't want that heroin, you know, I wouldn't be selling it because there'd be no market for it. So, you know, they're at fault as well. Sure, we can look at a drug addict and ask what their culpability is when it comes to engaging in addictive behaviours. But quite simply put, you are the one producing the drug of choice and supplying it to them. You have moral culpability as well. In fact, I'd probably argue that, especially if you're suggesting that consumers are addicted effectively to this kind of news, you are more culpable, surely, because you are the party who knows that and is willingly playing off that hunger and feeding it for your own gain. In a future episode, in the not-too-distant future, I am planning to do a longer episode where I unpack what I think is really driving the current media crisis, because it is a media crisis and it's very, very serious and very problematic. But it's not, I don't think it's some great Illuminati-driven conspiracy where the lizard people have taken over the media. I don't think anything like that at all. I think it's much more straightforward than that, but it's still very, very serious. And it's really problematic, because if you're going to have a healthy, functioning and civil society, we really rely on accurate sources of information. If we don't get accurate sources of information, particularly if there is a bias which actually inflames things in a particular direction or leads to inflammatory outcomes, you actually end up with a breakdown in public discourse happening. And I think that's exactly why we're seeing a lot of the breakdown now, because the media are not really, or a lot of the media are not really playing the role that they should be playing, which is to try and produce as balanced and as impartial as possible coverage from a human source of issues. And particularly the more serious the issue is, I think the more nuance and balance has to be applied to the reporting of that. It just seems to me that when you're running stories like this, journalistic ethics have gone right out the window. And that's a very, very serious problem. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Left Foot Media.